recording this presentation, the training webinar for completing the Healthy Food Pantry Assessment Tool for Montana. And I will introduce myself just briefly now. My name's Alexandra Bush-Kaufman, and I have with me today as a co-presenter Marie Walsh, a research assistant who also works for the Regional Nutrition Education and Obesity Prevention Center of Excellence West. And this training is designed for users of the Healthy Food Pantry Assessment Tool. And the training is meant to really make filling out the tool a lot easier. We did pilot testing, and we did field testing of this tool. Actually, and Montana was one of our partners in the field test. And we heard in the pilot that people really wanted to understand and know more about the tool, especially the food pantry managers or the lead volunteers. They wanted to see kind of what the background was, why certain questions were asked. And the training can also be a conversation as to, why and how we're assessing certain things and what can we do about that. Because sometimes if an assessment is given without a training or there's no conversation there, it can feel very top down. And so this tool was designed around a collaborative model where SNAP-Ed and FNEP would work with their food bank, food pantry partners to make those changes. So that is kind of how we'll be structuring the training and the frame from which some of our questions will be answered. Okay, so really quick, would like to disclose that this project is the result of a grant from the Regional Nutrition Education and Obesity Prevention Center of Excellence initiative. And I made a few changes to this presentation today. Okay, so a little bit of background. We want you to know that we did our homework in the way that we created this assessment and evaluation tool, the types of questions that we ask, and the kinds of interventions that it is attempting to promote. We did 41 in-depth phone interviews across the 13 most western U.S. states. We did those interviews in spring 2016, so about a year and a half ago. So this information I feel like is pretty recent. We talked to different people at different stages or different levels of the emergency food system and included nutrition educators in our sample. We asked people to tell us during the interviews how they would describe a healthy pantry or a healthy emergency food assistance setting. And there were two main themes that came away from that. The first was that a healthy pantry is a place where clients are treated with dignity and respect, both in the way that the clients are served, but then also the culture within the pantry and the way that it's set up and the way that people receive food, and that they feel welcome, things like that. And then the second way, specifically related to health and nutrition, was healthy food was a wide variety and good quality selection of fruits and vegetables, which was more than just fresh, but also frozen and canned. So having a variety of different types was really important. And then we did the pilot test the following summer. We went out to 5 different states. We were in Oregon, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada, and California. We visited 15 pantries and we did the initial pilot test there. And we collected a lot of feedback about what people liked and didn't like, about the layout of the survey, about which questions were clear or unclear, and which questions didn't make sense. And we made some changes to the scales based on that feedback. And that's also where we learned that people really wanted to know about the tool before doing the first assessment, and where we got the ideas for the training. So today our objectives will be for attendees to gain familiarity with the Healthy Food Pantry Assessment Tool, to increase attendees' comfort in choosing response options, and also to practice. And I would like to just say that, you know, the assessment tool is based on a set of these best practices that we got from the interviews, but also from what is going on out there in healthy food banking and healthy food pantry initiatives, similar to Feeding America's Nudges, and there are other healthy pantry interventions through the SNAP-IT toolkit, and other food banks have other types of projects. So this assessment tool is not specific to an intervention, it's just meant to measure the environment. So there are actually a lot of different things that you could do that work for your agency, for your site, that are specific to you and maybe not work somewhere else. But this assessment tool could be used in multiple locations and should still measure positive change, no matter what your intervention or your unique situation is. And we have tested the tool now in 45 different pantries of different sizes, both by the number of pounds they serve, the number of clients, how often they're open. Some pantries are open 24 hours, some only once or twice a month, mobile pantries, school-based pantries, you name it. And that testing has gone on in 7 different states across the country, including Montana. And so we do feel that hopefully this tool should be able to measure the changes that are going on in your site and positively reflect you know, the success of SNAP-IT interventions and also other community partnerships. So if you do, if you are able to have a copy of the assessment in front of you, that would be really helpful. It's not necessary because we will have pictures on the screen, but if you'd like to follow along, feel free. And let's get started. So I think you should be able to see my face. I'm Alexandra Bush Kaufman, and I'm in an office in Pierce County, Washington, on the West Coast. And I'd like to introduce Marie.
Hi, everybody. This is Marie. I am in our office right now in Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I am helping Alexandra with this presentation from across state borders.
Yes, so this was a multi-state project, and we'll have our contact information at the end of the recording, and you can contact either myself or Marie with questions related to the tool. We've both been very intimately involved in each step of the process, and we will take turns presenting just so that we can get through all of the questions. Okay, so the beginning of the tool has a blue square for pantry information. This is not part of assessment scoring. You will record the initial information about the pantry, including like the date of the visit, the name of the person conducting the assessment, or if there are multiple people going together, the name of the agency that you're at, and then the pantry address. We also have space for the pounds of food distributed last month and the number of clients and whether or not it's a mobile or a school pantry. None of these questions are scored. They're just for collecting demographic type information to look at, you know, does agency location affect size, things like that, or, you know, are there some months where you get a lot of clients but your distribution is also really high, things like that. So it's just looking at trends. And when you're conducting the assessment, just go back really quick, the date of the visit is important because many of you probably know that the beginning of the month or the middle of the month or the end of the month might be a busier time for you depending on when SNAP benefits are given out or how that, and that might work slightly differently in your state because each state does SNAP or food stamps a little bit differently. The date is also important because the assessment should be completed closest to when the pantry is open to serve clients. The assessment being modeled in a way to promote the dignity of clients as they select foods, and then also to encourage a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, frozen and canned fruits and vegetables, low-fat protein, and low-fat dairy. The assessment really, when it comes to measuring quality and variety of those foods, is looking at what variety or quality do clients have access to. So you want to do the assessment close to when your distribution hours are, and maybe even, you know, right before distribution, so that when you walk through the pantry, you're walking through it as a client might walk through it and see, like, okay, like, this is the number of apples and potatoes that I've got today. These are the canned foods that we've got. This is the bread. And when you're filling that out, so that the assessment will reflect the variety and the quality that's available to clients. So we'll get started with section A, and there are sections, there are slides similar like to this one that are for questions. So I'm going to keep going. Please write your questions as they come up in the chat box. And when we get to those question slides, I will pause and check the chat box, and then also invite anyone to unmute themselves to ask a question. So, question 1. See attached walkability checklist to determine the walkability score. This number is subtracted to the score from the score calculation. This is the only score that's subtracted, and it uses a secondary assessment that is subjective. It's from the National Highway Transportation Administration. And the purpose is to find out how clients feel walking to or from the food pantry, and also getting an idea of the physical accessibility related to the sidewalks, the safety of the neighborhood, how fast cars are driving by. And the only reason that you subtract the score is because we wanted to keep the score between 0 and 100. Yeah. So the better your food pantry scores in this assessment here, then that would relate to a lower score that you would subtract. It's the only confusing part, I hope. Okay, number 2, is there a bus line within one street block of the pantry? We want to know with this question, is the pantry busable? Specifically, how accessible is it for clients who might be using public transit or another type of shuttle, maybe like a senior shuttle to and from a senior center or something? You can look for a bus line or a shuttle during the walkability assessment, or ask the food pantry manager, or if you're the food pantry manager, you might already know, if there is a shuttle or a bus stop within one street block. One street block is subjective. So here, this is actually the building where I am located. So that's my office. And these little blue dots on Google Maps are bus stops. And even though this one might look a little bit closer, that's a construction site. And I don't actually think that bus stop exists anymore because they're not always updated like that. So I would say that this would be the bus stop that I would use. And it is in fact like a 3-minute walk from the front of my office. So when I would be answering this question, if I was considering my office with the assessment, I would say yes, there is a bus line within one street block of the pantry. Okay, is the pantry accessible by persons of all abilities? So this is looking at accessibility for individuals that might have difficulty walking on uneven surfaces or might be using wheels. So you would select no if persons with limited abilities would have difficulty entering the pantry or the food bank at all, or that it's difficult to navigate on wheels. There's no ramp, there might be big cracks in the sidewalk, things like that. You would select yes, limited access or alternative entry. If there is an accessible entrance, but it's not the main entrance. In other words, there's like a side entrance or a back entrance where people who have mobility challenges have to go into a different entrance. You would select yes, fully accessible main entrance and exit. If both the entrance and the exit, if there's different doors, you can get in and out with wheels or with mobility issues and you experience no problems. So everyone uses the same entrance. An example would be, you know, a smooth paved surface, a ramp, and accessible parking if you had a parking lot. Okay, does the agency where the pantry is located either have its own parking lot or share a lot? You would select no if clients must use street parking, if parking is on site or more than 1 block away, or if the pantry only has one designated parking space. Maybe if you were located in a city center or in an agency building where there are multiple other agencies and there's only one designated spot, and all the other spots are always taken. But if you share a lot, in that case, you would want the pantry to have 2 designated spots, then you could say yes. Or the pantry has its own lot with 2 or more spaces. Number 5, are there bars in the window? Are the windows of the pantry free of bars or barriers? You would include the building where the pantry is located if it is part of a larger agency. So for example, if the food pantry is part of a school and it might be associated with the school nurse or the school librarian, you would, in that case, you know, look to see if the school had bars on the windows. If the answer is, are the windows free of bars? Yes, they're free of bars, that's a 1. And if they're not free of bars, that is a 0. And in this example here, this is a pantry entrance free of bars, and this is a corner store actually, but these are the kind of bars that we're thinking of. They're like anti-theft. And we know from public health interventions in corner stores that the bars on windows, while they might be anti-theft, they're also discouraging from people from accessing those spaces. So this question is getting at, is the pantry welcoming to people who might, you know, be a little hesitant to accept food assistance? And also might possibly speak to the safety of the neighborhood. Okay, is there signage indicating the pantry's location from the nearest road? So we want to know, is the pantry visible? Do the people who might need some food assistance, are they aware of where they can get it? You would select yes if you can see the sign from across the street. And in this photo here, I'm standing across the street and taking this picture. This is a church mobile pantry that is located in my neighborhood. And there's a digital sign which also includes the pantry hours. So you would select no in this case if there's no visible sign identifying that there's a food pantry or food assistance agency in that building or space, or if it's unclear or difficult to read from standing across the street. Okay, number 7. On which days of the month is the pantry open to serve clients? In the calendar below, put an X for each day of the month the pantry is open. This question is not scored. So in this example, the pantry is open every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday of the month, and the first and third Saturdays. So you might score it like this here. And you can just put X's, or you can make small X's, depends on what you want to do. This is not a scored question because each pantry has different hours that are usually designed to meet the needs of the clients, and also when the volunteers are able to get to the pantry to help with food distribution. But it can also help you assess if you're open enough, or maybe there's one day of the month that might be busier than others, but another day of the month that is really slow. Could you redirect volunteers to be open more on the weekends or later in the evenings, or when your clients access the pantry space? And then number 8, what hours is the pantry open to serve clients on the days selected above? Please describe if those hours are different for different client populations like seniors, refugees, or other. This question is not scored. So in our pantry example here, we could list the hours for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday as 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And on Saturdays, pantry is specifically open from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the first Saturday of the month, you could say that's when we have our senior distribution day for our CSFP boxes. And then on the third distribution, that's when we have a Spanish speaker, like we ask all of our Spanish-speaking volunteers to show up then to help families that there might be English language learners. So you could include that information there. Number 9, what kind of check-in procedure does the pantry use for first-time clients? So questions 9 and 10 recognize that pantries often have different check-in procedures for first-time or returning clients, depending on if they're in your system or not. And for TFAP, I believe that there is a requirement for a zip code verification, but that the zip code verification is only required once, just to know, what geographic area people are coming in that are being served with those commodities. And so that's why proof or address or ID is counted as one document is required. So if no documents are required, you would also select a 2 here. But also if there's just one piece of information. You would select a 1 for first-time clients if both proof of address and some kind of identification are required. And then if multiple documents are required, so that would be more than 2, then you would select a 0. So that would be more than an ID and more than proof of income that would be required to receive food, and more than address as well. So number 10, what kind of check-in procedure does the pantry use for returning clients or clients on their second or following visits? So this is similar criteria for the previous question. We're talking about when people show up to the pantry and they're signing in to get food for the day. What do they need to do to sign in to get food to get put on that list for distribution? Again, you would score a 2 if no documents are required. And some documents required would be proof of address and ID only. And multiple documents would be proof of address, proof of ID, proof of income. So more than just 2. And then number 11, does the pantry have an electronic check-in procedure? Yes or no? If yes, please describe. So this question is not scored, and that's because we know that there are many different types of check-in procedures that pantries can use, and that there is somewhat of a trend in going towards electronic or keyed-in entry to speed the process along, to make it less burdensome on the client if they're remembered in a system, or if they have a card that is scanned. That might be they use that card for other services as well. And we're just, with this assessment, you can fill out the electronic check-in procedure. If you would like to describe like what you're trying to do, it might be a good question for raising money, for implementing a procedure, or evaluating whether or not your current procedure is working. Okay, number 12, where is the waiting line for check-in, and is there a place to sit down? So this question is looking at where clients wait or stand when they are trying to get into the pantry. And unfortunately, we know that lines might form before the pantry opens, so the assessment should be conducted to look at, when the pantry is open. So for those purposes, you don't need to think about a check-in line that forms before the pantry opens. So during the open hours, where do people wait to put their names in to receive food for that day. So if there is an inside waiting line with seating for everyone, then you would select a 3. If there's an inside waiting line without seating, or there's just very little seating, so a lot of people end up sitting on the floor, then you would select a 2. If the waiting line is outside and there are places to sit down, and maybe the weather is pleasant and you might have comfortable seating, you could select a 1, because again, they're outside and they're in the elements. And then if the waiting line, when the pantry is open, is outside and there's no safe place to sit, then you could select a 0 here. This would depend on your priorities in completing the assessment and wanting to look at, how many clients you are serving, and also, do you have space for everyone to sit down, and thinking of ways that, like, this question is sort of meant to address a potential barrier in that if a family needs food, and the only person that's available to get the food because everyone else is working during the day is someone who might be on disability, can they go to the pantry or the food bank and pick up that food? Or would they avoid the experience altogether because it might take too long, there would be no place to sit, it would be unsafe, they might have to walk too far, things like that. So 13, overall, how long do clients usually wait to receive food after checking in? So this is, they have waited to check in, they have signed in for the day, and then where do they wait? Or how long do they wait before they can begin receiving their food? So if wait time after checking in is usually 10 minutes or less, you would select a 2. If wait time is usually more than 10 minutes but less than 30, 15 or 20 minutes, then you would select a 1. And if returning clients, after they've checked in, they have to usually wait for more than 30 minutes, then you would select a 0. And if you're not at the pantry regularly, or you might be on a busy or a slow day, you want to make sure that you're communicating with whoever is there to know when you answer this question, are you seeing a typical wait time? And, making a note in the margin for whether or not your wait time is typical that you are observing. And then for each section of the tool has a subtotal area. Section A's subtotal area is unique because you add numbers 2 through 6 and also 9, 10, 12, and 13, and then you want to subtract number 1, which is the walkability score. And this is a little unique for Section A because there are some unscored questions that help assess when the pantry is open. And pantries are open at different times and every community is different, which is why that's not a scored question. Okay, so I saw that there were some things in the chat box. And the walkability checklist, I did send that to Carrie this shortly before the webinar started. And you can also find it, it's from the National Federal Highway Safety Administration. I actually have a picture of it. I'm hoping you can see that walkability checklist. Okay. And is Social Security card considered ID or more than ID? I actually think that your Social Security card is considered a form of identification, and I'm not sure if it's considered form of or a proof of citizenship, but it's a pretty big thing to carry around with you because if you lose that, your Social Security number might be out there in the public. And personally, I keep my Social Security card in a safety deposit box. So I guess it just depends on, it's definitely proof of ID and you could use that. If Social Security card is the only thing that is required, you could use that for 2 here if it's just one document required. And then for the next question, if it's still required for returning visits, then that would still be a 1. That's how I would answer that. And yeah. Okay, so any other questions? Just for section A. Is my screen sort of sideways? Okay. Okay, so we're gonna go through section B, and please definitely ask questions. We want to keep the webinar as short as possible, and there's a lot of questions that we want to kind of go over and also do some practicing. So don't feel bad about you know, typing in the chat box or unmuting yourself if you have a concern that you'd like to address. So section B is where most of the points are awarded in the assessment tool, and this was intentional because the assessment tool is really meant to capture the variety and the quality of the food that is available to clients. I'm going to turn off my video. Sorry, guys. It's distracting. Okay. Camera. Okay, so you want to assess the quality of the food that's available to clients, and in keeping with the theme of promoting fresh, frozen, and canned fruits and vegetables, we also want to promote low-fat dairy and low-fat protein. And that's because many times people that face food insecurity also experience struggles with chronic diseases that can be complicated by obesity. And so there is an effort to reduce the amount of fat, sugar, and salt in clients' diets so that they can have an overall more wholesome diet that, that isn't as high in those processed foods. So, number 14. Does the pantry have access to a garden, farm, or farmer's market that provides fresh produce to the pantry? So you would select a yes if the pantry or the food bank agency receives fresh produce through a local farm, farmer's market, or community garden. That might also include if the food bank itself has a garden or a small farm. And then a no would be selected if the only place that you get fresh produce is from a grocery store or just from the food bank that just has a rescue or a salvage program. Okay, 15. What kind of food distribution does the pantry use to send food home with clients? Select 1. Client choice means that clients remove items directly from the shelf themselves like they were shopping in a grocery store. So to select a 4, clients choose and remove all foods themselves without assistance. So we have an example here. This would be if the client had a cart or a bag and they are physically pulling the food from the shelf themselves. You would select a 3 if clients choose and volunteers remove. And that would include if they have a personal shopper that goes around the pantry aisles with them or stands in front of the shelf. And if the client just points to it and says, I want that, I want that, I want that, and the volunteer is selecting it and taking it off the shelf for them, then you would select a 3. If you have a mix of pre-packed boxes and volunteers select foods for clients, or a mix of pre-packed boxes and client choice, you would select a 2. And then if you are only pre-packed boxes or bags, and the boxes or bags are packed according to family size or life situation, maybe like a homeless box versus a senior box, things like that. And if that's the only way that you distribute food to send home with clients, then you would select a 1. If you select 1, 2, or 3, then you're going to skip 19 down to 19. And this is because questions 16, 17, and 18 are food marketing principles that rely on the kind of the psychology of a person choosing something off of the shelf themselves. When an individual makes that kind of selection, they're susceptible to different marketing. And in this case, we're questions 16, 17, and 18 are about healthy marketing and marketing to promote those healthier choices. And so here there are examples of little shelf talkers and whole grain options, low sodium types of tags that are magnetically attached to the shelf here. So having someone physically be able to pick the item out from a shelf or from a display or from a table or a bin, you need that person to be able to choose that, to then use healthy food marketing to encourage them to make the selection. Okay, so number 16. So you would have said, yes, this is a client choice only pantry, so then we're answering question 16. Are fruits and vegetables placed before other foods in the pickup line? Include fresh, frozen, canned, or dried fruits and vegetables. So in the order that people are moving through the pantry to select their foods, you would have fruits and vegetables would be one of the first 2 things, and then you would score a 2. If fruits or vegetables are first or second, then that is a 1. And if fruits and vegetables are at the end, that would be a 0. And thinking about how fresh, frozen, and canned might apply here, let's say all the canned goods are at the beginning and all the fresh foods are at the end. Even in the case where it might be easier to have fresher food at the end because that's where the refrigerators are, ideally, in order to encourage the amount and the quality of fresh produce for fruits and vegetables, low-fat protein, and low-fat dairy in clients' diets, we want them to be building meals around fruits and vegetables, frozen, dried, or canned, or fresh. And to build a meal around that, we know from marketing research that it should be the first thing that's chosen, that people generally tend to build meals around the first thing that they select. And so that's why we want them to first choose fruits or vegetables in this case. So please view this example and tell me how you would answer question 16. So in this scenario, fresh fruits and vegetables are at the end of the line, while the canned fruits and vegetables are at the beginning. What score would this question receive? So the pantry client starts off with their box, and they go down and they select their cans, and then they go to the bread room and they select their bread, and then they pull some protein out of the freezer, and then they walk out the door, and then there's fresh vegetables near the exit. Yes, so I see that we have a response. So this would receive a 1 because the fresh items are at the end and the canned items are at the beginning. So we know that this may be a common scenario. I have seen this a lot, and it's oftentimes easier to have the fresh stuff at the end depending on where your coolers or your distribution delivery is. It is a best practice to have clients and customers choose their fruits and vegetables first, again, to build around that, to ensure that they really do get that in their diets, instead of building their meals around grain items or higher fat protein items. Okay, 17. Are fruits and vegetables placed at eye level or waist level and easy to reach? So a 2 here, both easy to see and reach, would be similar to a grocery stand in a grocery store or produce stand at a farmer's market. And when you're answering this question, you want to ask yourself, can I look at and sort of reach and sort through all of the produce without being uncomfortable? You know, could my grandmother who had arthritis, could she make a selection of what is available from canned fruits or vegetables or frozen fruits or vegetables or fresh? Can she make a selection without like getting too uncomfortable? And so if, you know, everything is sort of out on a table like here and you might have to reach or bend over, or if stuff is up really high and someone does, you know, needs assistance to get the stuff that's up high, or if everything is only 6 inches off the ground, meaning that you have to bend over and sort of sort through, you would select a 0 if it's difficult to see and reach, and if it's on tables or difficult to reach, but you might be able to see them, then you select a 1. Okay, number 18. Are there signs that highlight the location of fruits and vegetables within the client choice model? Examples include arrows, item locator signs, daily availability lists. So even if your fruits and vegetables are the first thing that's in the front of the line, or they're maybe out displayed on a table and they look gorgeous, food marketing research still says that people are more likely to select those things, take them home, and eat them if you have a bright yellow sign or maybe an orange sign saying, hey, look here, take home some oranges to your family, which is another kind of way to suggest something to a client, and then if it's been suggested to them, they're more likely to take it home and eat it. And I believe that there are some nudges from Feeding America that support that intervention there. Okay, so number 19, are there signs that highlight the nutritional benefits of fruits and vegetables displayed throughout the pantry? So first, you want to walk through the pantry and count the signs. Walk through the area where there are fresh, dried, frozen fruits and vegetables, and count the number of shelf talkers or small signs that are matched that detail some kind of nutrient content. And nutritional benefit might include fiber, vitamins, minerals, protein. So you would select no signs if there are no signs, if you're starting off with 0. You would select a 1 for 1 to 3 signs, so you just count 3. And then if this was the pantry that we were going through and we saw these 4 signs, 1, 2, 3, 4, plus more, then we would select a 2. So once you get to 4, you can just select 2. Okay, 20, fresh fruits and vegetables. So this is specifically about fresh fruits and vegetables. So is fresh fruit available to clients on the day of the pantry visit? If yes, you go to 21. What is the overall variety of fresh fruit in the pantry on the day of the visit? Count each type of fruit as one type. For example, yellow apples, red apples, and green apples would only count as one type of fruit. So once you get to 7 or more types, you can select a 3. If you have 4 to 6 types, you would select a 2. So in this example here, we have red and green apples, you know, Granny Smith and maybe Red Delicious, clementines, limes, and then a grape variety. This would only count as one type of fruit. This would be grapes. So here in this example, we would select a 2. If you have 1 to 3 types, you would select a 1. And if there's none available, you would select a 0. And that might occur if initially there had been fresh fruit available when you did the on the day that you started, but maybe you were doing the assessment at the end of distribution hours, and then you would have to select a 0 there. So again, I would encourage to conduct the assessment at the beginning of your client distribution hours. Be one of the first people to walk through the pantry before clients are coming in or before volunteers start packing boxes to see, you know, what you have that's going to go home with people. 22, what is the overall quality of fresh fruit in the pantry on the day of the visit? Choose the best answer that represents the overall quality. So you're going to be looking at the quality of the fresh fruits and vegetables that are available, looking for things like wilting, decay, shriveling, brownness, dryness, or color changes. And with this scale, 0, 1, 2, or 3, you want to select the one that best represents the quality. So if you're very confident that all of your fruit is great quality, then you would select a 3. If most of it is a good quality, but you've got some overripe fruits or vegetables, or, you know, some underripe, maybe like, you know, you've got all green bananas and just a few yellow ones, but they're not low quality, they're just underripe, then you might select a 2, which would be high medium quality. If more than half of your produce is, you know, kind of on shaky ground because it was rescued from the grocery store, or if it was just not a good harvest, you'd select a 1. And if, you know, you're looking and you're like, you know, all this produce that I have available for clients to choose from is really not very good, I wouldn't select it myself, everybody has bad days, then you could select a 0. And we'll just go through some pictures here. So it might be a little bit hard to tell just from the picture, but in the red circle here, the lettuce has started to get slimy, and then the cauliflower has started to decay, and that's pretty obvious with those black spots. Shriveling is a sign of age, and so here this pepper on the right is older, and it's started to shrivel and it's started to lose some water, similar up here to the apples that are losing water because they're older. Brownness, again, a sign of age, and then with broccoli and other vegetables, color changes that might occur. So as colors are changing, the mineral and the nutrient composition of that produce also changes. So this broccoli over here is not only younger, it's been on the shelf for the least amount of time, it also is has a higher nutrient content than the broccoli on the right. And bagged items, the carrots that are on the left in both pictures would be considered a good quality carrot because they're not dried out. And the carrot on the right would be considered poor quality because they're drier, and in some cases might even pose a health risk because dry carrots like this can be choking hazards. I don't know if anybody's, except for me, has choked on a dry carrot, but I've definitely done that. Okay, so then you get to question 23. Are fresh vegetables available to clients on the day of the visit? If no, you would skip to number 26. But if yes, you would go on to assess the variety and the quality of fresh vegetables, similar to how you would assess the variety and the quality of fresh fruit. So in the example that is included within the assessment tool, you would count each kind of vegetable as one type. For example, romaine lettuce, iceberg lettuce, and butter lettuce would only count as one type of vegetable. Okay, so I did see that I had a question in the chat box. Oh, an agreement. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to keep cruising. Number 26 is at the bottom of page 4, and this is a question about frozen storage. It's not scored at this time. If you do select yes, then you go into page 5. If you select no, the pantry does not have frozen storage, then you get to skip all of page 5 because page 5 is asking about frozen fruits, vegetables, and lean protein. Okay, so for counting variety and quality of frozen foods, we're looking at, of course, packaged frozen foods, and also, the amount of frost, which would indicate if the item has been thawed and refrozen. So mixed vegetables or mixed fruit would count as one frozen vegetable or one frozen fruit. So if there are different types of mixed vegetables, and we'll go through an example, and they're not exactly the same, but they're mixed vegetables, those count as one type because they would be used similarly in a recipe when the client were to get home, unless you feel that they're unique enough. Like if it's mixed bell peppers, like rainbow bell peppers, is a mixed vegetable versus a bag of peas and carrots. Well, then you can count one as, that's bell peppers, frozen bell peppers, and then the other is mixed peas and carrots. For counting variety, for this assessment, you don't count mixed dishes like lasagnas, pastas, noodles, pot pies, TV trays, meat products, frozen potatoes, snack products, and that's because typically those foods are already in abundance in the diets of the individuals that are likely to frequent a food pantry. And they're actually items that are just in abundance in the American diet in general. This assessment isn't taking away points for the presence of any of these items within the pantry. It just doesn't add to the total score. So 27, what is the overall variety of frozen fruit and vegetables in the pantry on the day of the visit? So here, you wouldn't count these frozen meals, and then the steamed vegetable bags would count as one type. So in this picture here, that's 3 types of vegetables. Number 28, what is the overall quality of frozen fruit and vegetables in the pantry on the day of the visit? So again, we're looking, this is kind of an indicator of food safety. So if you see little to no frost on any of the fruits or vegetables, you would select a 2. Now this picture here, these frozen strawberries, I would select a 1 because there is frost visible on them, and I would be concerned when I thawed them that they wouldn't hold their shape. These might be really good strawberries for a smoothie or a smoothie puree, like a strawberry puree or strawberry jam or something like that, but I wouldn't put them in a fruit salad. And then if when you're looking at your frozen fruit, it's all kind of in a block and like a solid form, that's an indication that it was thawed and then it refroze in that shape, and that's a potential for bacteria to get in there and be just sort of waiting to explode into foodborne illness. And so if it's frozen solid like that, you would select a 0. Okay, and then I do want to briefly talk about how would you assess the quality of frozen fruit and vegetables if, like in this example, everything is in an opaque bag. So I would encourage you when you're doing this assessment to have a plan for what you're going to do with the fruits or vegetables that you might be checking out, that you might be handling, handling with gloves or something. Per whatever your agency protocol is. In this example, if your bags are all opaque and they're difficult to see, I would say to assess the amount of frost that you cut open the bag, and then you can, if you have frozen vegetables, cut the bag open, check it, say okay, that's there's not really any frost in here. That's great. Our freezers are doing well. These are good. And then you can take that frozen food and use it in a food demonstration. Maybe, make some stir fry or a demo on how to use frozen vegetables in a crock pot stew or something like that. So getting creative when you're conducting the assessment. Okay, lean protein. So we are using the National Heart Lung and Blood Association qualifications of lean protein, which is 2 to 3 grams of fat per 1 ounce serving of meat. Most meat on the label is in a 4-ounce portion, so that would be 12 grams of fat or less. And if you don't want to do the math and turn over every single package of meat that you have in your pantry, you can use this list. So these are the foods that count as lean protein, and it's important that it must be chicken or turkey with the skin removed, because that's where a lot of the fat is within the poultry items. We are also including fresh protein here because we did learn through our field test and our pilot, a lot of pantries and food banks told us that when they do receive donations of fresh protein, they often freeze it because it lasts longer. So for 29, use your best judgment when you are selecting the quality of fresh and lean protein. And in the assessment tool, it specifically talks about frozen protein. But if you do have a lot of fresh protein, choose the best option that corresponds to the quality of your fresh protein. And you're going to count all of your frozen or fresh lean protein sources. Do not count dairy or eggs in this question because they get their own score. So we heard from our food banks that were working with us on developing the tool that dairy and eggs were unique enough and difficult enough to get into the pantry that they should be on a different score because they were other important sources of protein in clients' diets. Okay, so I've got an example here. So this is just looking at types of protein. So how many types are listed here? If we have frozen turkey breast, firm fresh tofu, dried black beans, and dried red beans. We don't care if it's low fat or not. So this would count as 3. That's correct. And that's because the red beans and the black beans are beans. They would be used similarly in a recipe. And I see a question from Stephanie. How would you classify game meat? This is something Montana pantries see a lot of. This is also something I think that is seen a lot in Canada and also Alaska. And out here in Washington, we see a lot of fish too. I would, in that case, use your best judgment. The list that we got from the National Heart and Lung and Blood Association, this list, that's pretty inclusive. I am not as familiar with game meat, but I guess I would look at its fat content, and what you are looking for is in a 4-ounce portion, how many grams of fat are there? And to determine does that count towards your lean protein? So it's not, there are no points that are taken away for higher fat proteins. You just don't get to count it towards the variety. That's a really good question though. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer. Okay, number 30. So what is the overall quality of frozen and fresh lean protein in the pantry on the day of the visit? And you would assess this similar to how you looked at frozen fruits and vegetables. And then we move on to B4, number 31. So for this, we're looking at canned and dried fruits and vegetables and lean protein. And here, low-fat peanut butter is the type of lean protein that we're talking about. If you do have a lot of regular peanut butter, it doesn't count towards the variety of low fat. And that's just a consideration for the amount of fat that's in Americans' diets. And with that being said, there is a caveat for whatever the goals of the assessment are for your pantry, you can adapt this assessment to meet those goals. So if you want people to have protein in the form of peanut butter as an option, and you want it to count, even if it's low-fat peanut butter or just regular peanut butter, then I leave that up to the Montana Food Bank Network, because you can make that change to reflect your priorities. But normally this is where you would count lean peanut butter, low-fat peanut butter under number 31. Okay, so are most of the canned vegetables labeled as low sodium or no salt added on the day of the pantry visit? So if all of your cans are low sodium, no salt added, that's a 3. If more than half, but not all, are low sodium, that's a 2. If you have some, but it's not more than half, that's a 1. And if you don't have any low sodium cans, that is a 0 for that day. Number 32, are most of the canned fruits labeled as low sugar, no sugar added, or canned in their own juice on the day of the visit? So that's scored similar to number 31. And then 33, this is where low-fat peanut butter comes in. What is the overall variety of canned or dried lean proteins available to clients on the day of the visit? Select the best option that corresponds to the lean proteins that you have available. So a wide variety would be beans, lentils, low-fat peanut butter, and tuna canned in water. Those are the 3 that you need to have. Legumes, low-fat peanut butter, and tuna canned in water. If you just have legumes and low-fat peanut butter, then you would select a 2. If you only have legumes, dried beans, or lentils, that is a 1. And if on the day of the visit you don't have any of those sources of protein available, you would select a 0. Okay, so B5, the Healthy Food Pantry Assessment Tool is aimed at low-fat dairy to primarily focus on providing food to older adults, to older children and adults, including older adults. So we do know that for younger children, particularly under the age of 5 and even under the age of 2, that whole milk is the recommendation there, and we would encourage that whole milk be something that families get through partnership with WIC. And then there was a question at the end of the assessment as to whether or not the food pantry or food bank has a referral system with WIC. So if you have a family that requests whole milk, definitely stock it or refer that family to WIC. For this assessment, we're focusing on increasing the opportunity for people to select lower fat options. So these are the items that count as low-fat dairy products for the variety question. You can also count other items, but they have to meet all of the following criteria: 7 or more grams of protein per 1 cup serving, less than 5 grams of total fat per 1 cup serving, and at least 300 milligrams of calcium per 1 cup serving. And that might be depending on the weight of the product or the total calories. It could be 25 to 30% on the daily value, depending on which nutrition and facts label you're looking at, because the nutrition facts label has changed a little bit. So you will notice that almond milk and coconut milk and oat milk are not on this list, and that is because they don't have a high enough protein content, and they usually don't have enough calcium unless they've been fortified with calcium. If you do come across almond milk or coconut milk that has been fortified with protein and it meets the criteria, then you count it towards your variety. So number 34, what is the overall variety of low-fat dairy items? And you're looking, in the question it says above, because that's where the table is. The table is at the bottom of the slide here. So here in this example, we've got canned evaporated skim milk, and we have packaged, I don't remember the name, air packaged sealed dairy milk. It's both low-fat milk, so that counts as one type. Avoid counting items with full fat, low protein content, or low calcium content, and also be wary of cheese. Cheese is generally not considered low fat. Even if it's labeled, it still usually has more than 5 grams of fat. And you also will notice that the variety scale is different here than it was for fruits, vegetables, and protein. And that's because we did hear from our pilot testers that dairy was harder to get into pantries. So if you had 5 or more types, they were like, that's a wide variety. Like, that needs a 3 score. And so we heard that and we adjusted the scale accordingly. Okay, 35. What kind of eggs are available to clients on the day of the visit? So this includes whole, fresh, powdered, fluid packaged eggs. Select the best option that corresponds to the eggs available. So if you have whole, fresh eggs or any other type of eggs, that's a 3. If you just have powdered and fluid packaged eggs, that's a 2. So no whole eggs. If you only have powdered or dry eggs, that is a 1. And if you don't have any eggs available on that day, then that is a 0. Number 36, what is the overall variety of grain items on the day of the pantry? Do not count pastries, cookies, cakes, or sugary grains. So you're looking for just the number of grain items: quinoa, popcorn, rice, barley, oatmeal, bread, pasta, muffin, bagels. If you have different bags, different cuts of pasta, that all still just counts as pasta. If you have brown rice and white rice, that only counts as rice when you're looking at variety and type. And you would avoid counting grain items with 10 grams of added sugar per serving, which usually excludes most processed cereals and children's cereals. You know, even the healthier marketed cereals like Total or Total Raisin Bran have a lot of sugar in them. And so we're not saying that you shouldn't have those options available, but just that it shouldn't count towards the overall variety that's offered to clients that are coming to your agency to receive food. And then 37, of the grain items, what is the availability of whole grain products on the day of the pantry visit? So looking at everything that you have available, what percentage would you estimate of those are whole grain or whole wheat or that correspond to that? So in this example here, we've got one type of grain, that's pasta, and of our pasta, we have 1 out of 4 bags or containers that is a whole wheat option. So this example here would correspond with some whole grain. So it's more than 0, but it's not 50%. And then the answer, the total section is on page 8, which is where section C is. And that's because it didn't fit on any of the other pages. So here you would refer back to each page and you can transfer the score over and then write your section for your subtotal for section B here. And this is also where most of the points are received, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're getting food out to people. So I'll pause for questions and pull up the chat box. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pass it over to Marie. And Marie will be doing sections C, D, and E.
All right, thank you, Alexandra. I'll start a video too. So section C, if you wouldn't mind skipping to the next slide, is on policies of the food pantry. So section C has 6 yes or no questions, and they ask about documented, written, formal policies in place in the pantry. So for these questions, you would not include those that are just spoken only, that are just supposed to be known. Only include those that are written in a manual somewhere or just formally documented. And that's because if there's a change in pantry leadership, maybe unexpectedly or suddenly, documented policies would be more likely to be continue to be enforced, ideally. All right, next slide, please. So 38, does the pantry have documented nutritional guidelines for food brought into the pantry? And there are some examples of some procurement policies. So things like not accepting donations of soda or candy, or policies in place where the pantry only purchases low sodium options, things like that. Anything along those lines that's addressing the food that's brought into the pantry. So policies on not accepting spoiled or expired foods, those are not included here. And again, only include policies that are documented. Next slide. 39, does the pantry have documented nutritional guidelines for food given out by the pantry to the clients? So this is very similar to the previous question, only about food given out by the pantry. So there again are some examples listed of distribution policies. So those can be like those ensuring that clients receive food that reflects the MyPlate guidelines, or not distributing candy to clients. And again, documented ones only, and don't include policies on not sending out spoiled or expired foods. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, number 40, does the agency and or the pantry have a documented respect and dignity policy for how clients and volunteers are treated and expected to act? Examples include a written policy covering client behavior in the pantry, or a non-discrimination policy. So this question is about policies addressing the emotional environment within the pantry, and that's a theme throughout this toolkit, but this question is specifically asking whether there's a documented policy addressing the way that clients and volunteers are treated in the pantry or expected to behave. So if there is a documented policy in place like this, you'll select yes, and if not, you'll select no, and you'll skip to question 42. Next slide. So 41, is the respect and dignity policy or statement visible in a place where clients and volunteers can see it within the pantry space? So if you answered yes for number 40, this question is just asking whether it's displayed somewhere that clients and volunteers can see it. So here's an example of a respect and dignity policy displayed that we saw during our pilot tests. And this was on a wall where clients come to check in. Right, next slide. 42, is food safety training a documented requirement for staff or volunteers who have leadership positions? So staff would be paid pantry employees, and that can include like AmeriCorps volunteers or other Service Corps volunteers that get any kind of stipend for their work in the pantry. And volunteers with leadership positions would be those who manage other volunteers or who have leadership responsibilities within the pantry. So if food safety training is a documented requirement for people in those roles, you select yes. And 43 then asks whether the food safety training is a documented requirement for volunteers who do not have leadership positions in the pantry. So those that don't volunteer on a regular basis, or just don't have leadership responsibilities. So if food safety training is a documented requirement for those people in those roles, you'll select yes, and if not, you'll select no. And we have a little example here, a little example scenario. So if an agency has a written policy that volunteers who will be repacking food must read through the food safety pamphlet on proper food handling. So for this scenario here, would the answer to number 43 be yes or no? If you would type it in the chat box, please. Okay, so this one would be, in this scenario, would be yes, because there is a policy and it is written. So if there's any confusion about that example, please let me know, and I will answer it if I see anything in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll keep moving forward. Next slide, please, Alexandra. Okay, that's it for section C. Are there any questions? It doesn't look like anybody typed in anything while I was going. Please feel free, though, to, if you're typing anything right now, or if anything comes up, just go ahead and type it, and I'll answer it if it pops up. All right. I'll move on to section D, which is on food safety, frozen, chilled, and dry storage. So D1, oh, I see a question. Let's see, so document meeting having a written guideline. So yes, Rachel, it would be anything that's written down. So that can be documented anywhere, and it doesn't have to be a particularly long policy like the example we shared in the, I think, previous slide that was displayed is just a one sentence statement. But anything that, if there was a change in leadership, so maybe the owner, a new owner came into take over the pantry, something that is written down and formal so that they continue to enforce it. So if it's something that's just spoken only, then there'd be a good chance that if the leadership changed, the policy wouldn't continue to be enforced if there was a change in leadership. Alexandra, do you want to add anything to that? Let me know if
yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. So so documented has a wide interpretation. It needs to be something that is posted or written somewhere. It can be within a policy manual, but it could also be like a sign or like posts in the bathroom that say employees must wash their hands, volunteers must wash their hands, that kind of thing. So here, this is a written policy for volunteers who are repacking food. I think we assume here that you're repacking food for just a day. So they're temporary volunteers, and they're going to read through a food safety pamphlet on proper food handling, and then they're going to be wearing gloves. So a sign that says, like, all volunteers repacking food should wear gloves. As long as it's up there and it's a visual cue for people to be responsible for the food safety as they're volunteering at the agency, that counts as a documented requirement.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexandra. So I can move on to question 44. And yep, so D1 is on page 9. You're welcome, Rachel. And it's on storage. This subsection is on storage specifically. So 44 asks, does the pantry have frozen storage available for foods? So this is the exact same question as number 26. So if you answered no for 26, you'll answer no here. And if that's the case, you'll skip to number 47. If yes, number 45 asks you to record the temperature. So if the pantry has multiple frozen storage units, then you'll record the temperature of the unit with the most food. And we're asking about frozen and refrigerated storage later. We're asking about chilled storage because having chilled storage can increase the amount of fruit and vegetables and lean protein that the pantry is able to offer to clients. And we're asking about temperature for food safety reasons, ensuring that foods are stored properly. Next slide. Thank you. So 46 asks, please select the following types of freezers the pantry has available for food storage. Include off-site units and list the number of units. Choose all that apply. So 45 and 46 are not scored. And for this question on frozen storage, you'll check each type of unit that the pantry has available. And in the column to the right, which isn't displayed on this slide, but in the toolkit, there's a column to the right, and you'll list how many of those units that the pantry has. And again, like the question states, you'll include units that are off-site. So those can be ones that another agency lets the pantry use. If there's like a neighbor that has a large walk-in cooler and they let the pantry use that space, then you can include that as well. So the list here includes some of the main types of freezers that we encountered developing this toolkit. So, but if there's another type of freezer that's not listed here, you'll select this last option, other freezer, please specify, and in the space provided, you'll describe that type of unit. And if the pantry has a freezer with 3 or more doors, you'll check that multi-door option and you'll list the number of doors that it has. And then if there's a freezer or a freezer refrigerator combination unit, like a household type of freezer fridge combo, you'll count them here in 46 only, but you won't count them again in question 49 on refrigerated storage. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so here are some examples of those household refrigerator freezers, and these would be counted in 46. Next slide. Okay, so we have on the left a single door household cooler, and on the right would be a single door commercial reach-in cooler. And all of these images that we're showing are, they can be refrigerators or freezers, so that's why we call them coolers in the slides. Next slide. Okay, and the 2 pictures on the top show large walk-in commercial coolers. On the lower left would be double door commercial reach-in coolers with displays, and on the lower right are multi-door commercial and display reach-in coolers. And if the pantry has one of these on the lower right, then you'll record the number of doors. All right, next slide, please. So these are just like 44 and 45, but they're asking about refrigerators. So does the pantry have refrigerated chilled storage available for foods? If you select no, you'll skip to number 50. If yes, please record the temperature. And again, if there's multiple refrigerated storage units, you'll list the temperature of the unit where most of the food is. Next slide. All right, and then you'll complete this one just like 46, except for refrigerators. And there were some examples in those previous slides if you want to look back and refer to those if it's not clear which one to choose. All right, next slide, please. Number 50, what is the approximate square footage of all dry storage space available to the pantry? This question is not scored. So dry storage is usually the largest storage area in the pantry, and you'll estimate the dry storage as best as you can, length times width, and include off-site storage space as well, if that applies. In partner agency raters, if you're filling this out, you can ask a pantry representative what an estimation of the dry storage space would be. For 51, please describe the dry storage space. This question is not scored. So this can just be a really brief description. We're just asking this because dry storage spaces can really vary a lot between pantries. So there are some examples there listed at the very bottom, things like indoors or outdoors, humidity controlled, if it has 5 aisles of floor to ceiling shelving, or if it just has one single 7-foot shelf, things like that you'll include in this question. All right, next slide. So D2 on page 10 is on food safety. So 52 asks, is there a thermometer or thermostat in the dry storage area? So you'll select no if there's no thermometer or room thermostat. And if there is one, but it's broken, you'll also select no. And if that's the case, you'll skip to number 54, and you'll select yes if there is a functioning thermometer or thermostat. And 53, if yes, you'll record the temperature of the thermometer or thermostat, and you'll select the appropriate score. So you'll write the temperature in that line, and if it's between 43 and 83 degrees Fahrenheit, you'll select 1, and if it's not, then you'll select 0. Next slide, please. 54 asks, are hand washing signs displayed above sinks? So hand washing is really important for food safety and preventing foodborne illnesses. And this question's asking whether there are signs displayed where people in the pantry wash their hands. So the signs can either be to illustrate proper hand washing procedure, or they can be reminders for volunteers to wash their hands before returning to work. So the rater will identify where the sinks are, where staff and volunteers can go to wash their hands, and see whether there are hand washing signs displayed above those sinks. And if there are no hand washing signs, you'll select 0. If every one of the hand washing sinks has a sign displayed, you'll select 2. And if there are some sinks that have signs but others do not, you'll select 1. And there are some examples there in those images. All right, next slide, please. 55, how clean and clear is the area where food is brought into the pantry? Observe the area where food is brought into the pantry. This is also called the food receiving area. It's most likely going to be in the back of the building or by an exit door. And this is probably not where food is going to be given to clients. So here are some images to represent each scoring option, basically to assess clutter versus dirty. For clutter, just see whether volunteers or anybody that's bringing in food, if there's anything in the way that they could trip over. And for dirty, think of if you were to drop a piece of fruit on the floor, whether it would be filthy, if there's like visible dirt and grime all over the floor. So if there's visible dirt on the floor and there are things that a volunteer would trip over walking in, you'll select dirty and cluttered or 0. If the floor is clean, but there are things that a volunteer could trip over, you'll select clean but cluttered or 1. And if it is clean and there's nothing that a volunteer or somebody walking in could trip over, you'll select clean and clear or 2. All right, next slide. 56, what kind of transportation equipment is available for use by the pantry? Ask the food pantry manager or representative what transportation the pantry uses to collect and or distribute food. So if there is only private transportation, if there is no like designated vehicle at all that they use for picking up or distributing food, you'll select 0. And that's if the only vehicle that's available is somebody's personal vehicle. So say a volunteer or a staff member lends the pantry their truck once a week to pick up food, that would be 0. For shared vehicle or food bank distributor vehicle, you'll select 1. So that's if there's at least one vehicle that's not privately owned and the pantry uses it to collect or distribute food, and it's a vehicle that's shared between pantries or another agency. Maybe the food bank lets the pantry use it, and that would be a 1. Pantry or agency-owned vehicle in use, or 2 would be if there's at least one vehicle that's insured and owned by the pantry agency that's not privately owned. That'll be 2. All right, next slide. Okay, so that's it for D on food safety, frozen, chilled, and dry storage. Are there any questions there? Don't see any now, and for the sake of time, we can move along to section E. Alexandra, did you have something to add?
No, we'll just address questions as they come up. We're almost through the assessment tools, so we'll keep moving.
All right, section E is on other services that the pantry offers. And there are just 3 yes or no questions here, so we'll move through these pretty quickly. Number 57 is on, okay, it says, does the pantry provide or partner with another agency to deliver nutrition education classes on site? So this question is specifically asking about formal classes on nutrition that are offered on site at the pantry. So this also includes the classes can have a cooking component to them. They often do, but they should be specifically oriented at educating the clients on nutrition. So classes that are just strictly cooking lessons or they're just food demonstrations, those would not be included in this question because we do include those in the next one. So this one just include classes that are held in an area that's a designated space for classes. So not ones that are delivered or administered where clients are in the process of picking up their food or waiting in line or checking in. So the common ones, as I'm sure you folks are very aware, are SNAP Ed, It's a common nutrition education partner, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Education, and FNEP as well, the Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program. And next slide, please. So 58, does the pantry host food demonstrations, provide samples, or distribute recipes to clients? So we've lumped those three things into this question. And food demonstrations can be by volunteers or staff or partners, anything that's demonstrating how to prepare or cook with foods that are available at the pantry. And samples include samples of the pantry food that do not count towards clients' food allotment for the day. And those would ideally be healthy samples, as opposed to if there's a big donation from a bakery of cupcakes. So ideally would not be things like that. So the recipes can be in any form. They can be pamphlets or a handout or an index card, cookbooks, anything that's available to the pantry or to the clients for free. Right, next slide. Okay, 59, does the pantry have visual or spoken referrals to WIC, TANF, SNAP, etc.? So these can be physical, visual referrals, or any system in place where clients are verbally referred to these programs. So those count as well. Next slide. Okay, and that's it for section E. If there are no questions, Alexandra will pick it up with section F and wrap up the webinar.
Yep. Okay, so other supplementary programs. So these questions are not scored because we know that they're strongly related to each individual agency's capacity, both in the funding that you have and in the volunteers, and that each, agency has a unique situation. And that being said, though, we did want to include these in the assessment because when we asked, what are you doing to make your food bank or your food pantry healthier in the interviews a year and a half ago, a lot of people did tell us that these were some of the programs that they were pursuing, and that, they were looking for different mechanisms to get food out to people. And they were also doing training with their volunteers on queuing clients to take more fruit, or they were offering gluten-free options or baby foods. So these are all just yes/no questions as to whether or not those programs are currently in place. There is information within our resource guide about these programs, and your food bank might be one that does offer some of these, but there's currently not enough evidence, and there's not enough going on in these areas for them to receive a score to say that this is the best practice, because each situation is so unique. So please let me know what questions you have about that last section. And it is section F and E share a page on page 11. And then on the back page of our assessment is question 69. What comments would you like to share about your food pantry environment? Please use the space provided below. This question is not scored. So this is where you would write comments to provide contextual details to understand, what's going on in the rest of the assessment. That might include, what hours you were open. If you have goals or things that you want to work on and improve, this might be a place where you could note that, so that it's documented, so when you do the post-assessment, you can go back and look and say, okay, I completed these different goals that I write on my pre-assessment. And then on the last page, there is an assessment summary score box where you can transfer the scores from the different sections and total up your score. So you add sections A, B, C, D, and E together, and your score should be somewhere between 1 and 100. And I'll go ahead and open the floor up for all questions at this time. And everyone is still muted, so if you have a question that you'd like to ask out loud, please unmute yourself, or if you want to type in the chat box, please go ahead and do that. Our contact information is right here on the screen, and definitely feel free to email either one of us. And then Montana State University Extension did participate, and so I do believe that they have got some experience in their belt in using this assessment, and then also in different interventions, and so you guys are probably in really good hands.
Thank you, Alexandra. This is Carrie, and if you have Montana specific questions, please feel free to ask those as well. Thanks.
Hi everyone, this is Stephanie, and I just wanted to put it out there that we do have the Nudges to Nutrition research available from Feeding America. So if anyone needs ideas as far as how to implement changes to advance the score in the assessment, I'm certainly happy to share the Feeding America research on nudges.
And Stephanie, I believe that's all in the linked in the toolkit as well.
Excellent.
Okay, yes, so I'm going to pull up, can you guys see this website? Yes. Okay, so our center website is WRNECE.COLOSATE.edu, and so that's the page here. And to navigate to this, you select Center Projects and then Healthy Food Pantry Assessment Project. And this is our project page where you have a little bit of background about how we did the testing, and then each of these links here will pull up
Send it to you guys.
the different pieces of the assessment tools. So there's a full toolkit, and then also just the survey itself. So just wanted to let you know that that is available through the website.
And I just wanted to share, last year we did test the tool here in Montana at quite a few of our different food banks, and there was large food banks, small food banks, client choice, not client choice, just a great variety. And I think I want to encourage everyone, you know, there's a lot of data points on this scorecard, and really all we're looking to do with the pre-assessment is see where we're at so we can look at some opportunities for some small changes that might improve the environment. So as with any pre and post assessment, please just take your score and see what you can do from there. There's no need to be at the very top, and there's nothing wrong with being anywhere from 0 to 100. So I think it's Stephanie and I's hope that it just provides some prompts and some ideas with where to go from here. Steph, did you have anything to add to that?
No, Carrie, you are right on with that. I think it's a great tool to see where we're at and then look at what areas that potential improvements could be made.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Alexandra and Marie, for your time today.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop the recording.